and up comes big Gil Hodges. He digs in, sees one he likes, and hammers a 3-run homer.
But Gil doesn't miss this one. There it goes. Al Smith goes away back to the base of the fence.
The story of Gil Hodges is a beautiful one. He just taught me so much by example.
Hodges comes storming into the bag, trying for a triple. He makes it safe.
Howard sends the ground to the Pee Wee reach. And these Dodgers at last are world champions.
Stats don't even begin to describe his mastery of first base.
He loved his family, he loved his country, and he loved the Dodgers.
He treated everyone equal. That's exactly who and what he was.
Hodges called for the ball.
Look at this scene.
Ask any player, build me a prototype of a first baseman. Everybody you know would build a Gil Hodges. If you had to name 5 first basemen of all time, Gil Hodges would be in that number. So if you're in that number, why you're not considered a Hall of Famer?
Gil, of course, he hit 370 home runs, and he hit in 4 figures for RBIs and runs scored. But there was something special about Gil. On the ball club, I heard players refer to him as a saint.
I know this, the man should be in the Hall of Fame. Gil Hodges, from his time as a player and what he meant to those Dodgers and how they succeeded as a team and what he did as a manager. If you can't combine those things and put him where he belongs in the Hall of Fame, then, shame on you.
Pee Wee said, if you had a son, wouldn't it be a great thing if he grew up to be just like Gil Hodges?
There are 2 major mysteries in the history of the Dodgers. The first one, what happened to the Kirk Gibson home run ball in 1988? Where'd that thing go? The other big mystery is, why isn't Gil Hodges in the Hall of Fame?
Jackie Robinson once said that Hodges was the soul of the Dodgers. And from what I know, that's an understatement.
Hodges played a major role for Jackie Robinson. Gil was quietly the peacemaker on the infield. The Hall of Fame should represent how much contribution did you make to the game.
I think he could have played most positions. He was this Hulk at first base that was kind of like a ballerina as far as this strength, this perfect person that could anchor the infield. He was just a natural at first base.
I know as a fielder, he won the first 3 Gold Glove awards when they first started, which means he was the best first baseman in baseball.
Gil's hands were so unusually big and thick and strong that Pee Wee said the only reason he wears a glove is because of the rules say that you have to wear a glove. Usually what the pitchers would do, some like a higher seam than others. With a higher seam, you might want to throw more breaking balls. Gil, he could actually raise the seams on a baseball. He would just squeeze that thing until he got it the way the pitcher wanted.
Gil's strength as a hitter was consistency, power, and you just look at the 14 Grand Slams, you look at the 300-plus home runs, he was the Rock of Gibraltar.
He was so strong in his arms, and how he held the bat and the sound of the ball, power, could hit for average. He was always a threat. He could drive in runs. He was a high on-base percentage guy. He didn't chase pitches.
This guy produced runs. The one thing that I think distinguished Hodges' hitting is the word clutch.
Gil's father, Charlie, was a coal miner here locally. And when Gil did interviews in the 1950s, he said that his father was the most injured coal miner of all time.
His father lost toes, from being in the coal mine. He died of what they called back then black lung disease. That's the job that he could provide for his family. Never wanted his sons involved in. He pushed him towards the sports area.
And I think that lesson about Gil's father, showing Gil how you work through any kind of injuries or any kind of disadvantage that you might have.
Cole was king there when Hodges was born in the 1920s. Cole wasn't king as he came of age. They'd been through real tough times. And getting out and finding yourself and your future far away from there would have been central.
When the war broke out, he enlisted and went into the Marine Corps. He felt that it was something that you do. It was an honor to live in this country, and now it was time to repay that honor by serving it. The Battle of Okinawa was one of the turning points in the campaign, and one that he participated in and won medals for.
The Dodgers had a third baseman a few years younger than Gil, who was also in the Marines. His name was Don Hoke, and he used to tell me, he would say, "Vin, everywhere I went in the South Pacific, Gil had already been there, and the stories they told about this gentle giant."
It wasn't anything he talked about. I think any time back then you were in a situation where you took other people's lives, it was something that was very dear and sacred. There was probably some conflict internally for him.
Tom Seaver, who was in the Marine Reserves, once asked Hodges, what was it like on Okinawa? And Hodges said to him, if you wanted to know how it was, you needed to be there.
He had one steadfast rule that I can remember, that was don't lie. Because if you lie, I'll never know when you're telling the truth. Never missed mass. Road trips were no excuse. There was a set of how to do things. And it was God, family, and country. And those didn't get altered.
When the Catholics would not eat meat on Friday, Gil had just played a long doubleheader, and it was Friday, and we were moving on to another town. And the flight attendant came by, and she had a great big steak dinner giving out to all the players. And she started to put the tray in front of Gil, and he looked at it and he said, "No, thank you." And she said, "Oh, Mr. Hodges, you've had a long, hard day. You should eat." It was Friday, and he said, "No." He said, "I'm too close to the boss."
On a Sunday morning, without any fanfare, he would go to Mass. It just became evident that he was devoted to his faith, and Gil was a peacemaker on the team. Hodges did not yell, he didn't scream, he didn't cuss, he didn't throw chairs in the clubhouse, but he'd look at you, and he'd singe your shorts. I mean,
I remember saying to Don Newcomb, "Did you ever hear Gil swear?" He said, "No, never, never."
You never hear him curse. You almost can't believe it, a human being that can't curse. I wish I could be like him. You said to me, "Would you like to be him?" I said, "Yes." What this guy did nothing wrong. And he's not in the Hall of Fame.
He emitted a chemistry somehow that people caught it.
He just exuded leadership. He was a no-nonsense guy, and he was a guy, as Jackie Robinson pointed out, you could always rely on him to have your back.
The game was played differently back then. Suddenly Jackie comes along, and when there was a chance for contact, Jackie would get it, but if you've got a strong person like Gil Hodges, Gil was always there to back him up.
There was always edge, right on the edge of somebody doing something physical to Jackie, somebody sliding hard into him. And Gil, big as he was, he'd take a hold of a guy's shirt and pull him off the pile. In the end, Jackie never was in a fight. Now, that was his own self-restraint that caused that too. But Hodges prevented an outbreak around second base. Historically, he had as much to do with Jackie's success on the infield as anybody.
Jackie Robinson truly believed that Hodges was the soul of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Jackie Robinson did not throw compliments around idly. He didn't say a lot of good things about a lot of people in his life. That Hodges was the exception.
For Brooklyn, the team meant so much, far more than the usual relationship between a team and the city. In Brooklyn, it was somewhat like us against the world. And one of those us's was their complete feeling for their players.
Gil represented the borough of Brooklyn like no other Dodger. He lived there full time. And I think the Dodger fans adopted him as their own son into Brooklyn.
The legend is that there was never a single boo for the entire time he played, at least at Ebbets Field. I believe it. That's how beloved he was. It wasn't just the player, the natural leader, the community figure, the intensely religious, though privately so, the colossal presence in the community. It was all of that. So that when you thought of what made the Boys of Summer so special, the first person you thought of was Hodges.
I never saw him booed, ever. I saw Duke and Pee Wee at times get booed.
Hodges never got booed in Brooklyn. And he had some bad slumps. Even in those bad slumps that he had, they never booed Gil in Brooklyn. And the fans caught that this is a sincere guy doing his best, and we didn't boo him in Brooklyn. It was amazing.
At the end of 1952, Hodges was experiencing a slump of historic proportions. In the World Series, Hodges went 0 for 21. And in his own words, he said, I probably cost the Dodgers the World Series. And that slump continued into the early part of the next 1953 season, to the point where it was national news. And then one Sunday, in a Brooklyn parish, Father Herbert Redmond said to his parishioners, it's too hot for a homily today. I want you all to go home and to pray for Gil Hodges.
And it turns into this movement in the churches in Brooklyn, pray for Gil's swing. And how cool is that, because they felt that strongly about him.
And shortly thereafter, coincidentally or providentially, the slump ended.
0 for 21 meant nothing to the fans. He never didn't run out a ground ball, never didn't run out a fly ball, never tried 99% and not 100. And that is what the fans knew, and that's why they loved and admired him.
I mean, the Brooklyn Dodgers were the heart and soul of the borough of Brooklyn. Everyone checked the score that day, and they stood a little bit taller if the Dodgers had won.
The Dodgers was part of your upbringing when you lived in Brooklyn. We used to buy the picture cards, play stickball in the street. There was no other sport other than baseball. And Hodges was my hero growing up.
You know, the borough of Brooklyn was so thoroughly frustrated when the Dodgers would win the pennant and face the Yankees and lose. They got in 1941 and lost. 47, they lost. 49, they lost. 51, they lost on the last day on the home run by Bobby Thompson. 52, they got in the series and lost.
In the history of the Brooklyn franchise, so many times did it come down to the final game, and it didn't work out. Now it's Game 7 at Yankee Stadium. When it came down to the ultimate game in the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers, October 4, 1955, they needed a couple runs, and Hodges comes through.
Campanella comes home when Hodges singles to left, and the Dodgers are out in...
After all those struggles, Gil Hodges drove in the only 2 runs that gave the Dodgers the World Series championship. Remarkable, isn't it?
It was like God looked down and said, now I got something for you.
Johnny Padres told me an interesting thing. There are going to be other 7th games. Somebody's going to come from behind and win in the last at bat, or somebody's going to pitch a shutout with everything on the line. That'll all keep happening. That's baseball, and part of what makes it so great. But the Brooklyn Dodgers will never win the World Series again. That day is frozen forever, was his phrase.
It was a shock for all of us. It was like VE Day and VJ Day all wrapped up into one. thousands and thousands of people were on the sidewalks, and the crowd was roaring. It was incredible. I've seen a lot of celebration in the cities that have won the World Series, but I never saw an explosion by the fandom as was in '55. It was a long time a-coming.
Baseball finally learned about the California Gold Rush. The tears through which these lady fans watched the last Dodger game at Ebbets Field failed to stop the move to the West Coast.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of Dodgers and Giants heartbroken, and a lot of angry Dodgers and Giants fans about them leaving. But this was the first big-time relocation where they went all the way literally to the other end of the country.
When the Dodgers came to the West Coast, they wanted to bring so many veterans because they had to sell this new ball club to Los Angeles. Gil was a hero in Brooklyn, and with Los Angeles, it was just more of a curiosity, but they really appreciated Hodges when they were able to see what he was able to do in a pennant race of their own.
The thing I remember the most about 1959, the Dodgers played probably the worst game in Chicago against the White Sox. Gil was spending extra time talking to all the other players, and sure enough, they won the series. And I will always think that he didn't play that well, but he spoke that well.
You take it for granted, but when you've got a bunch of young players around you, you need a guy like Hodges, and it turns out they win the championship in '59.
Winning the World Series made everything a little bit easier. That he knew his career was coming to an end. He knew his knees couldn't withstand it.
Hodges played briefly for the newly formed New York Mets, hitting the first home run in team history. In 1963, Hodges was traded to the Washington Senators, where he retired as a player and became the manager. The team improved each year under his leadership, and in 1968, he took over as manager for the New York Mets.
The Mets historically up to that point were just basically known as the lovable losers. Because I think actually people came out to the ballpark to see them lose and play bad baseball. I played 13 years, and for all intents and purposes, nobody talks about the other 12. It's really about 1969.
When Gil Hodges came, everything changed about the Mets, because this was a man who exuded purpose and seriousness.
I'll tell you how powerful Gil Hodges was. Our first team meeting, he told us that we were a lot better than we thought we were. We all looked around at one another and said, what in the hell is he talking about? He said, if you don't beat yourself, it's difficult for the other people to beat you.
He believed in platooning, and of course we didn't like it. You know, every player wants to play every day. We all believed in Gil Hodges. I mean, that was the reason we all bought into that concept. And after a while it worked, and when things start working, you're going to continue to do so.
Started to come to the ballpark early because we were feeling good about ourselves. We're doing a lot of family things together. We were a team on the field and off the field, and that's because Gil Hodges created that kind of atmosphere.
There was a stability and a sense that the guy with his hands on the wheel knew where he was going. Gil did creative things. We used like 4 outfielders in a situation where he didn't want a ball falling out there. He was in front of the game. He had one of the most adroit baseball minds I've ever seen.
A lot of the players loved him so much because he was more of a father figure for them.
You know, we felt like we were making some things happen. We were doing the things we needed to do. We got in the World Series against a team that was favored over us, the Baltimore Orioles, my hometown team.
I was sitting in his office and I said, Dad, how are you on this field with the Orioles? They are just so much better than you. Looked me right in the face and said to me, I have 25 guys outside who think they can win. That's all that matters.
We lose game 1, and I remember we're all sort of feeling like, wow, we didn't play very well. But Hodges said to us after that game, you don't have to be anything but what got you here. Don't try to be bigger than life. You're down a game. Be the team that got you here. Be yourselves.
The Mets lead the series 3-1, but trail 3-0 in the bottom of the 6th inning of Game 5.
The ball hit me. I knew it. During that time, the clubhouse guys made sure that your shoes would shine every day.
To get out of the way, and it's ball one. He starts down to first base.
Inside pitch, bounces, ball rolls into the dugout.
Gil Hodges carrying the baseball. It's coming over now. Hodges showing the baseball to DeMuro. Hodges, we might have a shoe polish play here.
Dad gets the ball, looks at it, and sees a scuff on it from shoe polish.
Hodges showing it to Lou DeMuro, who awards first base. Another shoe polish play.
Gil was well respected among players, managers, and umpires. They knew that his character wouldn't allow for him to do anything but was well. Clendenin came up, and we all know what happened.
Deep left field to the warning.
And for somebody of Gil's stature to take that team in 2 years to a world championship, I think it really meant something special to him.
Gil Hodges created that kind of atmosphere that it takes to win. That cares about baseball, that love baseball. If not for Gil Hodges, you wouldn't be talking about the '69 Mets.
Spring training, Dad had left to go play in West Palm. Before he left, we walked to the elevator together, him and I, and he turned to me and said, "Take care of your mom." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure. And I'll see you, tomorrow." But what does that mean? Just take care of her. Okay. Got in the elevator, last I ever saw him. During his funeral, Howard Cosell came and grabbed me and asked me to come outside the church. Took me to a car, and I got in the back of the car, and there was Jackie Robinson, hysterical crying. He leaned over, he gave me a hug, and he said, "Next to my son's passing, this is the worst day of my life." A little over 3,000 people, they said, wanted to walk through and see him.
That day was one of the most emotional times of my life. We were honorary pallbearers. And as we walked up the aisle behind Gil's casket, and Gladys Gooding, who was our organist, she played Back Home in Indiana. Oh, man, that got me big time.
Baseball accomplishments. They are what they are. There are people who were better, without a doubt. But there weren't many people who were better humans than him. You don't name a bridge after someone, not only in the state where you were born, but in the state that you made your home. You don't name schools after baseball players unless they have that kind of integrity and sportsmanship. And that's what meant more to him than anything else.
The Baseball Writers Association of America voting criteria for the Hall of Fame.
Voting shall be based upon the player's record, playing ability,
integrity, sportsmanship, character,
and contributions to the teams on which the player played.
I mean, I can do the Hall of Fame argument in my sleep in terms of stats. What makes Gil Hodges worthy of attention, and why you want 50 years from now some well-informed father to point to his kid and say, that's the guy you want to think about, is that every once in a while somebody comes along who's head and shoulders above the highest standards you can set for human conduct. Not just well-behaved, not just well-mannered, not just mamming and sirring, but somebody with character and leadership. It's just one of those examples we occasionally get of the ideal.
The great thing is the door is still open to be able to elect Gil Hodges in the Hall of Fame. So there's still always the hope. And that's kind of like the Brooklyn rallying cry. Wait till next year, wait till next year, because Brooklyn is done as far as baseball. It ended in 1957, but that's the one loose end. It's always important to be able to look back and see this was a great man, and in Dodger history, he's one of the icons.